I'm Karen Lloyd, the director of the Veterans History Project under the American Folklife Center here at the Library of Congress, and a retired Army aviator. I'm also the daughter, sibling, and widow of veterans. Milestone events are a perfect time to reflect on where you've been and then how you plan to move forward. Thinking of the Veterans History Project, I marvel at how it has grown into a collection of over 111,000 voices strong, built by hundreds of organizations and thousands of volunteer hours from across the nation. As a grassroots project, we're extremely grateful to have a network of veteran organizations, universities, secondary schools, scout troops, family members, other organizations, and members of Congress who recognize the importance of collecting and then preserving the first person veteran and Gold Star family accounts through the Veterans History Project. As an archive, we're incredibly proud of the work that our nation has done to continue to build this collection of oral histories, unpublished memoirs, original photographs, and other treasured memories archived through our National Library so that future generations will be able to hear from them and understand what they saw, felt, and heard, their stories. Today's panel will recognize some of these organizations that made sure that the veterans' contributions are not lost or forgotten, but instead stored to be cherished by future generations. It is my great pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Ashley Burns. Ashley is a combat Marine veteran who served as a broadcast journalist with the American Forces Network Tokyo and then established and led the American Forces Network Kandahar to expand internal broadcast coverage of combat operations in the southern area of Afghanistan. Following her combat tour, Ashley worked as a supervisor and reporter for the Pentagon News Bureau, where she managed the daily news production, which covered Defense Department news, policies, and operations. In 2009, Ashley was the military announcer for the presidential inaugural parade. She currently serves as the Disabled American Veterans Deputy National Communications Director, representing over 1 million members strong. Ashley manages and produces a wide variety of written, photographic, and multimedia projects for the DAV's internal and external communications program. A hearty welcome to Ashley and all the panelists. Thank you for joining us today to help celebrate our 20th anniversary in such style.
Thank you so much, Colonel Lloyd, and thank you for your service and for your leadership over this amazing program. It's my great pleasure to be here today with the Veterans History Project and with our esteemed panel. As you mentioned in the introduction, I serve as the Deputy National Communications Director for DAV, and we are honored to play a part in celebrating your 20th anniversary. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we share this milestone anniversary year with you. 2020 is also DAV's centennial anniversary, marking 100 years of service in supporting and empowering veterans to lead high-quality lives with respect and dignity. We accomplish this by ensuring that veterans and their families can access the full range of benefits that are available to them, by fighting for the interests of America's injured heroes, and by educating the public about the great sacrifices and the needs of veterans that are transitioning back into civilian life. So, having participated personally in the Veterans History Project, both as a veteran chronicling my own journey and on the other side as an interviewer, I can attest to the value that this project brings to everyone that's involved. The interviewer, the interviewee, and of course, those who are then able to listen to and experience these oral histories. I am thrilled to learn more from today's panelists, who represent a cadre of organizations across the country who have all participated in the project. We're going to begin the discussion today by asking each of our panelists to offer just a few brief introductory remarks about who they are, about the organization they're associated with, and then to tell us a little bit about how they got involved with the Veterans History Project. So Anita, I would love to kick off with you, please.
I was on the Active Guard Reserve program, started out as an enlisted member and then became an officer. I worked with giants all those years, just tremendous people. And I have been fortunate in my military retirement. Then 2 years later, I signed up to or applied for the job and became the military and veteran liaison for Senator Bozeman. And in this job, one of the projects he wanted me to work on, he asked me to breathe new life into the Library of Congress Veterans History Project here in Arkansas, because we had a low participation rate at that time. But it has been an absolute blessing to be part of the Veterans History Project here in Arkansas.
Anita, thank you for all you do continued for veterans, and thank you, of course, for your service. Chaplain McCoy, I think we'll head on over to you.
Okay, I am excited to be here and to be a part of this particular 20th anniversary of the Veteran History Project. I am a veteran. I was a part of the U.S. Navy and served as a chaplain with both Marines and U.S. Navy, deployed on various ships, as well as one of the few chaplains that served also on submarines, and had quite an experience in terms of serving submariners and their families, but and on ships. One of the things, though, getting involved with the Veteran History Project was to become a part of an activity that I thought was very needful and very engaging. I had heard so many stories as a chaplain of many of our veterans who tell their stories often to someone like myself or their buddies, but refuse to tell their stories to their families. And I was so impressed when I heard about the Veteran History Project that this was something I felt that I should be a part of. And when I was invited, I decided to launch a program called Chaplains, basically, which was then, we referred to it as 2013, with the ideal that I was going to get at least 213 chaplains to tell their story, because one of the things I noticed is that chaplains had been in Vietnam, had been various places, and they were not telling their stories either. So I launched two programs. One was called Heal the Healer program that was part of the VA, and we began to get chaplains to go through some counseling sessions to deal with their own grief and their own pain so that they can help others. So in the Veteran History Project, I began to enlist chaplains to tell their stories. I was the national president of the Military Chaplains Association, which had about 1,700 members, which was chaplains. Many was retired, but it is still going on. One of the only organizations, actually, that is a veterans organization that actually target chaplains. And being the national president of that particular group, I launched a program that we will begin to interview chaplains who had been in combat and had been with our troops, similar to the things that I had done. And with the tears and the cries and the sheds and hearing them tell their story, just let me know that the Veteran History Project is something that we must keep going, because this is something that is not only bring about healing, but it also give our chaplains as well as other veterans, and we're not just limited to our chaplains, but veterans to tell their stories all across the nation. And with the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the VA, they have all launched in with various groups, and also the National VA Black Chaplains Association, which I serve as the executive director, and we saw them to get involved. And as I served as a national director of VA chaplains, it was a great pleasure to be able, as director, to have a little clout to make sure that the program go on. So I'm retired now, but I am still a part of this particular program and glad to be a part of the 20th anniversary. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chaplain McCoy. We're glad to have you here. Thank you for your service. I know many of us in the military had relied on that spiritual guidance of chaplains, so it's a very important voice to have, and we're glad to have yours today. Sarah, we'll move on over to you.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on this great panel. I'm Sarah Maniscalco Robinson, and I joined the Iowa National Guard in 1997 as a broadcast journalist, so Ashley and I have that in common. And I'm still serving in the Iowa National Guard as a first sergeant of the Mobile Public Affairs Detachment. Probably about 10 years ago is when the Iowa Gold Star Military Museum asked me to start recording veteran histories. They would keep them at the museum, of course, and I would make videos, but I realized that after we did the interviews, they didn't go anywhere. And I thought that was a problem because the general public didn't have access. So through the Gold Star Museum's help, I founded my own 501c3, the Iowa Veterans Perspective. And now I travel the state of Iowa and I interview veterans, and all of the veteran interviews are packaged into Library of Congress Veteran History Project packets from high school volunteers. And then I come out to DC and submit them to Library of Congress once I have a large enough stack going. But so that's my story.
Excellent, Sarah. Yes, I'm glad to be in good company with a fellow broadcaster. Thank you for your service and really for being so out front and trying to push this program forward. That's incredible work that you're doing. Very much appreciated. Let's see, Mac, let's move on to you.
Yes, I am Mac Toller, and I am a 20-year retired Marine officer. I retired as a lieutenant colonel, an infantry officer by trade, but had a secondary as a judge advocate. I went to work for the House of Representatives in 2012 and found my way to the Wounded Warrior Program in 2016. Since then, I've been the director of both the Wounded Warrior Program and the recently created Gold Star Family Fellowship Program. So we're running both of those programs now. We have 120 fellowships for Wounded Warriors to work for members of Congress and 40 fellowships for Gold Star family fellows to work for Congress. And the Veterans History Project has been integral to our orientation program for all of our new fellows for several years. It really is one of the most important briefings they receive when they come to DC for orientation. And I think it's been one of the most beneficial programs for them as they return to their districts and serve their constituents in the member offices. And again, on behalf of the Chief Administrative Officer, Phil Kiko, we are very excited to participate today, and thank you so much for including us.
Semper Fi, Mac, we are glad to have you here. What a wonderful program you're running there, and I'm sure we're going to dig more into that. I can't wait to hear more about it. We're going to wrap up the introductions here with Mike.
Well, following the people that I've just heard from is kind of a low point for me since I haven't served. But I got involved with the Veterans History Project through the service to the armed forces with the American Red Cross. My son had just been deployed for the second time, and I figured there's got to be some way I can help out. And so I became a volunteer, and then about a year later, there was a call with Jason Steinhauer on one of our actual case calls, and he talked about this project. And I thought, we do so much for the active family members and the active members. This would be a great way to give back to the veterans. And so once I got the okay, we created a training. We got a lot of volunteers that were interested, and we're getting ready to hit our 600th interview, which this next month will be our 10th year of participating in this project. So I'm really happy to be here and real excited to hear from everyone else.
Wow, thank you so much, Mike. Congratulations on your upcoming milestones. That's wonderful. Great panel we have here today, and I think we'll go ahead and start digging in. Sarah, this one's going to come your way first. You come to this panel and to this discussion, with your 501c3 nonprofit status. Can you talk to me about the benefits or challenges that you faced and what advice you'd give to others?
Sure, Ashley. Well, one of the first benefits, I like to start with something good. One of the benefits of being a 501c3 nonprofit is you really have a lot of community support in that. If you're a charitable foundation, you really see a lot of people starting to volunteer to be a part of it. You are more likely to get certain funding because you are a tax deductible donation. But then some of the downfalls sometimes is you're up against all the other 501c3s when it comes to grant money. And we're fighting over pennies, it seems like some days, where I'll spend hours upon hours upon hours for a $250 grant. So some of the benefits are also that I am eligible for grants. So I try to count my blessings when it comes to that. And I love having the 501c3 nonprofit after my name because I feel like that really means that I'm doing good in the community. It kind of comes with that badge of honor. And I love having that.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely are doing great work in the community. Another organization that's doing great work in the community, I think we've all, certainly seen these in our communities, of course, the Red Cross. Mike, you're in a similar position with the Red Cross. Do you have anything to add to what Sarah mentioned? Or is there anything more specific you'd like to talk about with Red Cross chapters?
The statement that Sarah made about it being tough to get funding is, I think, everyone's issues. Luckily, I have a core group of volunteers that have no problem in donating to this project as far as keeping us running and things like that. But other than that, it's like once they drink the Kool-Aid, they're in. Once they've experienced an interview, you have them for forever, and that's great.
Yeah, definitely, Mike. Thank you. Mac, you mentioned you lead the Wounded Warrior Congressional Fellowship Program, and the basis of that is pairing veterans with members of Congress to serve as part of their staff. And like you alluded to, part of that training early on involves not only learning about their role in the office, but also learning about the Library of Congress and the Veterans History Project, and then kind of getting that hands-on experience of having the opportunity to interview each other. Have you noticed that there's any shift in the fellows after they've completed this part of their training?
I think absolutely. Most of our fellows are unfamiliar with Congress writ large when they come to the program. Many of them are fresh from the military or have only been out for a couple of years. And so they literally are not familiar with VHP whatsoever. And so once we bring them in and they have a chance not only to be briefed by the VHP staff, but also we actually conduct interviews of our fellows while they're here. So we'll usually break them out into a couple of cohorts and actually give them a chance to interview one of their peers actually in the Library of Congress. And I think between the briefing from VHP coupled with that experience, they are well prepared now to go out and attack the VHP in their districts as they're able to and as dictated or offered to by their district directors and chiefs and members.
Wonderful. And kind of that topic of outreach brings me to my next question, which I'm going to pose to the entire group. So if you'd like to respond, go ahead and throw a hand up so I know who we can have answer. Have any of you found that you're able to use the Veterans History Project as a tool to connect with constituents or within your communities? And if so, how?
Well, okay.
Okay, we'll start with Mac and then maybe we'll go with Mike and Anita. Here we go.
So this is a huge issue for our fellows in their districts around the country. The opportunity to parlay a VHP event into outreach to constituents, it's just limitless. And I often tell them when I'm talking to them about VHP, there are 5 benefactors of conducting a VHP event. First and foremost, a veteran is going to get to tell their story. And with our aging World War II and now Korean members, it's so important to capture those stories when we have an opportunity. A second benefactor of a VHP event is that our fellows have an opportunity to lead the event, to take charge and kind of take a leadership role of facilitating the collection of these stories. Third, those that are tasked to conduct the interviews have a chance to meet these veterans, hear their stories, and learn something about military history or a person that they might not have otherwise. And our fellows engage the services of the Civil Air Patrol, of high school girls volleyball teams, of local reserve units. All those folks benefit when they have an opportunity to interview these veterans around the country. I like to say the fourth benefactor of these events is the member himself. This provides an opportunity and a bridge for the member to get closer to his veteran constituencies and learn more about them and their issues. And then lastly, VHP benefits through the exposure because we typically encourage not only VHP to talk about this, but also we encourage our member offices to bring in local media to share this story locally through their various venues.
Excellent. Mike, what would you like to tag on there?
Because 100% right. Getting high school kids and involved in this is a great way of putting the word out there. I worked with Congresswoman Janice Hahn's office. They have us come out once a month and set up so that they can advertise and have veterans come in. But using VHP, as Max said, a lot of people aren't even familiar with it. So it's like once you tell them the benefits, whether if it's, their family hearing this for the first time, which is the case quite often, or if it's just the fact of the veteran getting a chance to release anything that is going on. But yeah, working with Congresswoman is just very beneficial.
And Anita, anything else you'd like to add on there?
We have trained over 1,200 Arkansans in the Veterans History Project across the state. And that has opened so many doors. It's a bipartisan, really a non-political program. And once people understand that, they're very much more receptive. And we have taught veterans service organizations, various kinds of clubs. Both of our VA medical centers actually do interviews within their volunteer services. We worked with Wounded Warrior Project folks, American Red Cross, colleges, high schools, nonprofits. This is just a gateway to share about the project and reach so many individuals, network across the state, and then touch so many veterans' lives. On the backside of it, we have built a relationship so that if a veteran or their family do run into a problem with a federal agency, then Senator Bozeman's office has that relationship that they turn back to for us to do constituency service work for them to assist them. One example, we had a 90-plus-year-old veteran that the senator actually interviewed. And during that interview, we discovered that he had never enrolled into the VA. And so we were able to make that connection, and he started receiving disability check and health care. So those are just win-win-win all across the board. Just a lovely program.
Absolutely. You all touch on this really important point of being able to utilize this program to expand a network and grow a network and really do that outreach to a bunch of different organizations that provide different resources to veterans. So thank you all for that. Chaplain McCoy, this next one's coming for you.
Okay.
You mentioned in your introduction that you learned about the Veterans History Project when you were asked to be an interview subject. Can you share how that experience really led you to create the Military Chaplains Project 2013, which I understand, you might give me the background here, but I understand it has to do with a pretty special group of World War II chaplains?
Yes. One of the things that had happened is that I think most people don't realize that chaplains, especially the ones that serve with the Marines, as well as the Navy and Army, they go with the troops. They are not like outside or just sitting in a chapel somewhere. They are really out there running, and they are getting shot at and everything else just as much as the troops are. The only difference is they don't carry a weapon. And they rely on their clerk or their assistant to be their bodyguard to look out for them. There's many days when they will have to be lifted. And I think that is one of the big outreaches, is letting folks know that chaplains are lodged where our military men and women are. They are not outsiders. And many have been, of course, not many, but I shouldn't say many when it comes to our other troops, but killed as well as in war is other things, and have given their life in sacrifice, one of the awards you might see in the back is the 4 chaplains that we talked about. I was invited to the Library of Congress to be a part of a panel to recognize the 4 chaplains who all gave their life by giving their life jackets as a sacrifice so others could live. They did not have enough life jackets, they thought, on that particular USS Dorchester that day when the ship was sinking, and they gave their life jackets, say, "Here, take mine." And they went on down to sea and sacrificed their life. Chaplains have been sacrificing their lives for many years. But what I wanted to say is that the Military Chaplains Association, what I did was when I came as an interviewee and to be interviewed, I was surprised of some of the questions to be able to talk about my story as a veteran because I had never did much of that myself. After I did my interview, I was so impressed that I went and asked the chaplain, who is Chaplain Barry Black, who is the chaplain now for the U.S. Senate, to come, and I interviewed him. And he was so impressed that it moved from one to the other. And one of the things that I was impressed, and even the folk who were in the Library of Congress, our group, our photographers and our media people, I looked over as we were doing an interview, and when Barry was talking about how he had the urns of both of the Kennedys, John and his wife, in his hands as he was walking up the ship to bury them at sea, I looked out in at the few people that was with us and saw the tears that was coming out of their eyes of how he was telling his story. Well, when we tell the story, it is something that never will be, in our own words, I like to say, it's something that will never be repeated exactly on paper. And I think this is the help that we give to our nation, but also to our families, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and years to come, to hear us tell the story of what we did as not just as chaplains, but as veterans, period, when we were in the military. And that's what I say is that with the National Chaplain, the Military Chaplains Association, which is a veteran service organization, that's why I was able to launch that particular program. And we have chaplains repeating that now throughout the system. And once they do one, as someone had said already, you get caught up and you feel like you got to do another one, and you end up getting caught in not just, and you grow and you begin to heal and help others as well, who is going through crisis, and be able to get them the help that they need from our veteran service organizations, from the VA, and from others that can help some of our hurting and wounded veterans who do not know how to often get into the system to get all of the things that they are entitled to. Veterans are not given things, they have earned it because they have put their life on the line for us.
Excellent. Thank you, Chaplain McCoy. You brought up some excellent points. Not only can the Veterans History Project be a very cathartic experience, but in my experience, I wish I'd had the presence of mind to ask my grandfather about his military experience before he passed away, and I never had that opportunity. So I think it can be a real gift to be able to share that with not only the general public, but with your own family members for years to come. Anita, I know that as Senator Boesem's military affairs liaison, you must do quite a bit of traveling across the state of Arkansas. And as you mentioned, some of that traveling has been to teach workshops on interviewing veterans. So I was wondering if you can share with us what that experience has been like for you, kind of dig into that a little bit, and why it's been helpful to deploy volunteers across the state to help you establish these collections.
Sure. Thank you, Ashley. Yes, we scheduled the first 2 workshops with the Veterans History Project. And after that, the office has not scheduled another one. We have been asked to come out somewhere. So all the other workshops that have been conducted was an invitation to come to that high school, that college, that veteran service organization, and so on, once the state started hearing about this project. And so that's phenomenal to me that we didn't have to push this. Arkansans saw the value in the project. So reaching, let's say 18-year-old high school students or 16, 17, 18-year-old high school students and connecting them with a veteran to interview is just so powerful. As an example, I taught a class in a rural community in Arkansas, taught about 30 students, and those students turned around and interviewed 27 veterans. And I will say those students really didn't understand veterans. So after they interview the veterans, I go back for an after action review. And one of the students stood up and she said, you know, I knew we were supposed to respect veterans, but now I do respect veterans. And that same class ended up making a documentary of their experience interviewing veterans. They interviewed themselves, they took excerpts from the interviews. They then took that documentary and had a very big community program at a local museum. From there, an article was in the VFW magazine about what this small group of students have done. And now the Arkansas PBS station is planning to air their documentary. So it just grows. Also doing that networking across the state, we have found depositories, kind of like what Sarah was talking about, where interviews were done and then they were put in a file cabinet somewhere. So we've had about 3 different organizations that have dusted off those interviews that they did 15, 12 years ago and have put those now into the Library of Congress. So it is such a pleasure. The networking, the opening of doors, the sharing of the Veterans History Project across the state has just been powerful. It is healthy. It is so healthy. You mentioned it being cathartic. Yes, it is, to the veteran. And like I think the chaplain said, that the families have not known most of these stories. So it's so cleansing for the veteran and the family to get to share these moments. And I am just thrilled that I get to be a small part of that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love, hearing about harnessing that youth volunteer spirit in Arkansas. That's wonderful. Mike, to kind of tag on to the volunteer question, you also give a lot of workshops and work with a large group of volunteers. So can you talk a little bit about what you look for in a good volunteer?
Sure. So the first thing is I really need somebody that can listen. Because listening to the veteran is as important as doing the interview. And what I mean by that is the fact that so many times we're in a situation where we want to ask a question and we don't give the veteran enough time to answer it. We're thinking, okay, I asked you, gave me an answer, when in reality, the veteran could be trying to think of an answer. And so listening is one of the biggest things I look for. But another thing is the fact, as Anita was saying, I've done several workshops for the high schools. And you're right when you say that the veteran loves to sit down and talk to these young kids. I mean, it's amazing to see, it's amazing to be part of. But having volunteers that are willing to, like we always leave it up to the veteran as far as when they want to be interviewed, what day, what time, all that stuff. So having volunteers that are more than willing to say, yeah, I can do that Sunday interview at 3:00 is amazing. And like I said, just like once they drink the Kool-Aid, they're in. We've been doing this for 10 years, and I still have 7 of the original volunteers that helped start all this.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that perspective, Mike. Mac, here's a question for you. What are some of the more innovative ways that your fellows have worked to develop the Veterans History Project in their district? And are there things that you would suggest to other groups?
Absolutely. I think one of the best programs that I've witnessed in the last 3 years was actually done by our fellow in Congressman Adam Smith's office out in Washington State. Not only did they schedule a VHP event to collect the stories of local veterans, but they also invited VSOs and employment agencies and other entities to participate also. So it was also almost like going to a small, I don't know, not a job fair, but you had all these other organizations that were there too, who had this. So they had a captured audience of veterans who might need their services or benefits. And so the veterans were able to file claims with the member office, apply for employment benefits or look for job opportunities. They were able to register with various VSOs that might be of interest to them. So it was kind of like a one-stop shop for veterans, and all those who participated and set up tables outside of the VHP interview area got the benefit because I got access to all these new potential members to their organizations. So we were very impressed with what our fellow Julian Purdy and Congressman Smith did out there in Seattle. It was a great event, and we often use that story when we talk about VHP to our fellows on how you could do this to get the most bang for your buck.
That's great. That's creative. That's innovative. That's exactly the kind of spirit we need right now, particularly in the situation that we're in with the pandemic. So,
And-
Anita and Sarah, this question is for both of you. Maybe we'll start with Sarah and go to Anita. You both work with a number of different organizations connecting veterans to interview. We've mentioned different, if it's places of worship, if it's schools, if it's veteran service organizations, retirement homes. Can you share a little bit about that and how the current pandemic has changed that approach for you, Sarah?
Sure. Well, we'll start with last year, how I did business. I got a grant through Humanities Iowa doing library presentations. And I just loved doing them because I got to travel across the entire state of Iowa and go to these little diamond in the rough where these veterans they're not hiding, but it's where they're hiding in these small little towns. They're not necessarily in the greater Des Moines area. So what I would do is I would go and do a library presentation the night before, spend the night, and then spend the next day doing a Veteran History Project interview day. And the veterans would sign up to be a part of this. Then March hits and everybody starts staying home, and I'm no longer allowed to travel to do these library presentations. So me and a few of the local librarians got together and came up with this thing called virtual library presentations. I just actually did one this week. And we're not following it up with the veteran interviews. One thing that I have decided to do within my own organization is I have a location here at my personal home where if someone would like to come visit me and be interviewed that's under the age of 50, our Global War on Terror veterans who are often overlooked because when you think Veteran History Project, people say, oh, so you must interview World War II veterans. But that's not true. There are so many veterans who are young and healthy still that are still out being a part of our community and being willing to leave the house safely. So I've just kind of shifted gears on the target veterans of I would like to interview more Global War on Terror veterans this year. And I wanted to caveat on something that Anita said. I had the most amazing thing happen during the quarantine. I was up at the museum, the Iowa Gold Star Military Museum, looking for something completely unrelated. And I found an old box of tapes that no one had ever processed. So I'm able, this year, I'll be adding an additional 20 POW World War II interviews to the Library of Congress, quite on accident.
Right. Anita, any follow-ups on that?
I would like to speak to an experience with a retirement home where it was actually a nursing home, and then I'll move forward. But I had a family that wanted their father interviewed. So I go to the nursing home to do that pre-interview, and the veteran was nonverbal. And so it was a very awkward moment. Like, how do I work through this. And so I asked the family to go back and find pictures or old uniforms or anything, any memorabilia from his time in the service. It was a World War II veteran. So they did, and I said, okay, I'll be back a week from today and we'll try that interview. So the family actually found an old trunk in their attic, and it was full of just magical, wonderful memorabilia, tons of photographs, and they sat down and visited with their father. So when I come back a week later, it was miraculous. This 90-year-old veteran was previously he'd been in a wheelchair. Well, he ended up walking with a walker into the room to be interviewed, and his memory was back and gave one of the most animated, entertaining, lovely interviews. So that pictures are just truly worth 1,000 words, and really brought that veteran back. That was a beautiful, beautiful interview. The pandemic has really hampered our movement forward. So what we've been doing is using this time to make sure we have tightened up all those packets to get them ready to send to the Library of Congress, and also keep communication open about what we will do more so in the future. We are working on several different workshops and interviews around the state just as soon as travel restrictions are lifted. I have not found a veteran that's fully comfortable yet with doing a virtual interview, but have one scheduled later this month that we're going to give a try with. But he's not real comfortable, but we're going to give it a try. So Sarah, if you have any pointers, please share.
Well, best of luck to you with that interview. Thank you both for some of those really vivid examples. Anita, that was a wonderful story. Thinking about these stories that may never have been told, that may have been lost to history. And Sarah, you mentioned even just talking about populations that may be overlooked, and the importance of incorporating those veterans into the Veterans History Project as well. So this next question will touch on that. Chaplain McCoy, I've heard that in addition to your outreach efforts with the project, you're frequently sending folks to the archival side of the project to listen and to view collections of veterans that you know. Can you share why you feel it's so important that groups like chaplains, and also for potentially those overlooked populations, women or minority groups, to share their stories as well?
Yes, I think that sometimes minorities and women have been left out, or felt they was left out of the process. Many of the women veterans was not, for a while, did not even think they were really considered veterans. I was in St. Louis, Missouri, to one of our conferences one day. It's with PTSD, when we were kind of developing it some years ago. And I remember a professor who came, and she said that I was a veteran and I was in Vietnam. But when I went to the VA, they told me you couldn't be a veteran. And she was a nurse, and and they told her you just was in the rear, so you were not important. And she said these words, and I repeat them as a chaplain. She said, how in the hell can you be in the rear when you're in Vietnam? She was being shot at. She was one who was going out there to see the men going to war one day and coming back. She having to take them off the helicopter or the emergency craft in order to try to treat them, even though they was well when they left that morning. And it shocked all of us men, veterans, that was sitting in that conference when she said those words. And even though that was over probably 15 years ago, but she expressed the fact that we had overlooked the women veterans. The other is that African Americans, and as well as Hispanics and some other minority groups, they came into the military, and that was a period of success for them. Many of them was in Vietnam, and they had various jobs in various places, and of course these current wars as well. I had two brothers that served in Korea. One was shot. One was a hero. Actually, he should have probably got the Medal of Honor because his story, when I really heard it, he had saved almost 60 or 70 people in his particular group battalion. But the fact is that African Americans are just now being awarded awards that they had never gotten. So it is that type of thing that have kept them. So I started, helped found the National VA Chaplains Association with that in mind, not just for awards, but for the purpose of letting their stories be told. The church that I have just finished being interim pastor of here in Hampton, Virginia, have about, I guess, somewhere around 200 plus veterans in it. And these veterans are men and women who have often not told their stories. So I launched now, we have what we call, and I'm glad to hear somebody talk about the worship part of this whole group, because that is where many of our veterans are now at. They're in our local worship centers, they're in our various places. And this is somewhere we want to go, because we launched something called a program that is Welcome Them Home, Help Them Heal. And we calling that as something that our various worship groups, whether it's Jewish or Christian or Muslim, that they are able to get into and do those interviews for our veterans. And veterans I think once this pandemic is over, that will be one place we can kind of begin to launch out even more, because they are coming together in our worship centers around the country right now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chaplain. It is so important to make sure that, the military is such a diverse population that we're really making sure that it's reflected in the Veterans History Project as well.
Let me say one other thing, is that the Native Americans is another group that is very important that we reach out to, because many of our Native Americans, they are telling their stories and they are telling it in the Veteran History Project as well. And we have a few, but that is one that they have been a part of all of our wars, and they are right now a part of our military story. And the Veteran History Project, as we look toward the future, must link in with our Native American population as well.
Absolutely. Another incredibly important voice to bring into that conversation, right? Anita and Sarah, I'm going to come back to you for a moment. It's my understanding that you also share some of that curated content on social media. So can you walk us through those collaborations and how they enhance your work? We'll go ahead and start with backwards. We'll go Anita, then Sarah this time.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. Yes, with Senator Bozeman's office, what we do after an interview, and with the permission of the veteran, our communications team and I work together to take excerpts from the interview and also develop a press release. And we put that on Senator Bozeman's Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, YouTube. Often many, especially hometown papers, will post that or publish that article. And that has just been a treasure, because some of the veterans are quite shy at first about not wanting to do social media or bring too much attention to themselves. But I've actually had veterans to call back later and say, thank you for making me go ahead and participate in that. I actually reconnected with somebody I knew 50 or even 70 years ago, or from around the world, that are relatives that they hadn't communicated with in years, because they saw them out on social media or they saw that article in the newspaper. A really sweet thing happened to a very, very shy veteran. His article was in the paper that he had participated in this project, and that Senator Bozeman had highlighted him in the Salute to Veterans monthly edition. And he went to church the next Sunday, and the church staff had taken a picture from the newspaper and posted it up in the sanctuary. So when everybody walked in, there he was. And it was just a thrill to him, just warmed his heart, because many people in that congregation didn't even realize he was a veteran or anything about his service. So just a few sweet nuggets that happened after the interview is over.
Those are great. Thank you, Anita. Sarah, follow-ups?
Yes, and I just love hearing those stories, Anita, because I also have that experience, and I love hearing that other people are able to feel what I'm feeling. So really, social media for me is where the rubber meets the road. It's where I really can bring those stories alive and reach a larger audience. So the way that people ingest information these days is much different than going to a library or watching an hour-long interview. Many of the interviews that I do, I make them into a 2 to 3 minute highlight using actual historical photos that they bring in, and then video that I also get from National Archives to be able to use. One of my favorite anecdotal stories is similar to Anita's, where I interviewed a World War II veteran, and he told me his story, and I made it into a video, but then I posted it on social media. He was one of the first that I had put on social media. And about a week later, I was noticing that my analytics were through the roof. He'd gotten tens of thousands of views. And I thought, what's going on here? And I started reading through the comments. Well, he was a teacher in one of our small towns here in Iowa, and his students were all talking about what a great teacher he was and thanking him for his service. And he has since then passed away, which is why we do this, but his story will live on forever. And I have this amazing saying that I often tell people when they're on the fence of whether or not they want to do an interview or not. And I say that there's an old saying that a person dies 2 times. The first time is when their soul leaves their body, and the second time is the last time that their name is ever brought up or their story is ever told. So through doing this project, we're able to continue to tell these stories and allow the veterans, regardless of how long ago they passed away, they're able to continue to tell their story through social media, which once you get it posted, it lives on the internet.
Absolutely. Thank you both for those examples. Very heartwarming and very powerful examples. Mike, I'm going to come to you for this one. Don't want you to think I forgot about you. Here's a simple question, but it may be, a rather personal one. Can you tell me how being involved in the project has affected you and those around you?
Of course, being involved in this project is probably one of the highlights of my life, to be honest with you. The ability to sit back and listen to someone tell their story, and then to be able to have that to give back to the family is without words. But I've been asked this question before as to why I participate in this project. And I'd like to give you an example of what happened. I had a phone call one day from a father asking if we could interview his son. And of course I said, yeah, we'd love to. And he goes, well, you don't quite understand. He's in the VA, he's in the hospital. And I said, well, that's no problem. We've done interviews in the VA before. And he goes, yeah, but here's the thing. He was a sniper in Iraq. And in fact, at the time, he had the longest kill shot, that they had, recorded. And him and his spotter got R&R, went to Austria to go snowboarding, and he broke his back, making him a quadriplegic. So I told the father, I said, that's not a problem. We can come in and still do the interview. So I took one of my volunteers that is also a nurse, and we went to the VA to interview Alex, and he sat over in the corner of the room, had a hoodie up. This kid was 25 at the time. And it was a little nervous at first, but he said he'd rather be in his bed for the interview. So we did that, went ahead and did the interview, which was at kind of slow at first until we started talking about sniper school, and then it got, he was get more interested. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that me personally, I will visit any of the veterans that I interview at the VA, like once a week until they're gone. And I went over to visit Alex, and as I'm walking in the door, his dad stops me, says, "Hey, Mike, come here. I want to tell you something." Well, of course, I'm thinking the worst. And he goes, "I just want to let you know that his mom and I and him sat down and watched the interview that you guys had made, and we really loved it." And I said, "Okay, I appreciate that. I just want to go in and say hi to Alex." And he says, No, there's something else. He goes, "I just want you to know that from doing this interview, as simple as it may seem, has actually turned Alex's life around to where he now wants to help other quadriplegics get better themselves." So that in itself, knowing that something as simple as an interview could lead to turning a young man like that totally around is everything I would ever want.
That's absolutely incredible and completely understandable when you say that that's, something that is probably one of the things that impacts you most in your life. Wow. Sarah, you mentioned earlier on that some of your video projects have actually landed in the Iowa Gold Star Museum. What does it feel like for you to have some of those stories so prominently displayed? And what have you heard as the result for veterans whose interviews are actually highlighted in the museum?
Actually, I hear stories almost weekly of people getting a hold of me that either saw a relative's interview in the museum or just a child that really connected with a veteran. I think the first time that I really understood that I was actually doing something pretty amazing would have been Memorial Day a couple years ago. I was volunteering at the museum, which I often do on Memorial Day. And I came around the corner, and my exhibit at the time was brand new. It's 3 monitors, and I just chose about 100 interviews that I really like to highlight to show the different diversity and that kind of things in different generations. And there was a line of young kids that couldn't wait to go push those buttons, and they put the little headphones on. Of course, this was before quarantine, but they put the headphones on, and there's a brother and sister sitting there sharing the headphones and watching through the videos. And it's just something that they're drawn to. Sometimes I think we oftentimes kind of think that kids are, only wanting to play video games or something like that, but they have a genuine curiosity. And it's the 2 generations coming together that I find to be the most amazing, where oftentimes the young people are cast aside because they're too young, and the elderly are cast aside because they're too old. But if you bring those 2 groups together, something actually quite magical happens.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very powerful. Clearly you're all incredibly passionate about this work and what you do with the Veterans History Project and with veterans. So I'm going to pose another quick group question. So again, just throw a hand up if you want to take a shot at it. What advice would you give to an organization, to a group, or even just an individual who is interested in getting involved with the Veterans History Project? Not all at once now. Let's, Sarah, go ahead.
Well, I would say that it's much easier than you might think. Sometimes people are a little intimidated when it comes to video production. And I've seen videos of all different qualities, if you will. But really, if someone's nervous, there's great things available through the Veteran History Project. If they don't know what questions to ask, there's the packet that you can download. So if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this," my advice is to just do it. You'll never regret doing the interview. You will regret not doing an interview.
Right. Yeah. And it is shockingly easy, I think. Mike, did you want to add on something there?
Yeah, it's really interesting how many of my new volunteers are actually products of being interviewed for the project. So it's really nice that to have a veteran that will tell their story, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I want to be part of this. And then to be part of this is so fulfilling for them. It's amazing.
Chaplain McCoy, do you have something to add?
Yes, I would say similar is that once one of our colleagues or someone do an interview or interviewed, they began to see the importance of it, and they immediately began to think of their associates who also that they can meet with and also interview them. It is something about hearing someone's story in their own words that not only is good for the interviewee, but it's also good for the interviewer. It makes someone feel, begin to understand that what I have went through. Let me just tell you one example. We were doing some interviews, and as we were talking in a group, one day, there was the troops that was coming back from Longspur, it was coming, actually the bodies, I should say, that was being shipped back to America. A chaplain was standing there who was making sure that they were identified correctly there in Longspur. And then when it received them here at America, another chaplain was there. It so happened that the two chaplains, one was telling his story and the other was telling what he had felt when he was shipping bodies back. And the other one was the one that was receiving the bodies. They never knew each other, never had met, but here they had so much in common that they had now become friends and could share stories now forever until they leave this earth. But that story is now there forever, about the two chaplains who never knew each other. It's happened so often, and storytelling is probably one of the things that will last forever, and veterans and their families are healed by hearing the stories of some of their loved ones and stories of their colleagues.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite pieces about the Veterans History Project. It really humanizes the individuals that are in the military, and it reminds you that you have, in many ways, shared that common experience. Anita, did you have something you wanted to add? I saw a hand go up. Or
Yes, Ashley. I was just going to talk about the ripple effect. And so I had a teacher slash facilitator in one of my workshops. And then she invited me to the facilitators conference. So I had hundreds of teachers and facilitators that I could talk to. And in turn, some of those were so interested in the project, then you get invited out to their high schools. So just the ripple effect, if you can get that one person interested and it just gets passed along, you get so much more involvement in the Veterans History Project.
Thank you, Anita. Yeah, and I think, again, I mentioned the ripple effect, and this next question is, again, one for the entire panel. We've talked about the individual level, why people should get involved. Why should an organization get involved with the Veterans History Project? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Anita?
For Senator Boozman, Senator Boozman is on the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. So we already interface with veterans and their families quite a bit, as well as the VA and various other federal agencies. So it is so helpful as an organization to be able to reach that community. Normally they're coming to us with a problem, and we're working on that problem. But when we can also do a project that's not political in nature at all, make them comfortable, help them share their story, help to make them reconnect with their family, their community, that's just such a tremendous thing. And then if we as an organization can further help them with other things, then that's great. But I think building that relationship with the veteran community through a project like this is incredibly important. Senator Bozeman's motto is to use the office for good. And I think this project is such an example of putting his motto into action.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Sarah?
So one thing that I think is really important and a good reason for organizations to be a part of the Veteran History Project is it's one thing that I think every American has in common. Regardless of who you talk to, if you use the term support our troops, people are like, yes, I want to support our troops. I want to do what I can. It's also an opportunity for organizations to do something good in their community. Every community has veterans, and every organization, regardless of what they have available to them, can help in this project in some way. It's something that they can give back to if they're the Boy Scouts. It's something they can give back to if they're the Court Reporters of America. And no matter what your organization does or what your mission is, the thing that we all have in common is that we want to support our veterans and support our troops.
Right, absolutely. Chaplain McCoy, did I see you raise your hand on that
Yeah.
one?
Yes, I feel that this is a very important part of our mission, and especially as our veteran service organizations. We have about 25 strong veteran service organizations, and yet we have a lot of auxiliaries as well in our country, and it is something that would be positive. They are the ones that attract a lot of our veterans. We complain that many of them are older now. We're not attracting the younger veterans as much, but we're still talking about in the millions of members that is a part of our veteran service organizations within this country. And I think to make that a project, a part of their services that they offer would be very good. Sure, they would need the help from the Library of Congress and from many that will help to provide training. But when I think about the Military Chaplains Association, the American Legion, when we think of the Veterans of Foreign Affairs, and we can go on, we begin to think about these organizations that have a lot of missions, yes, but the veterans come to them on a daily basis. And it's more than just the games or the bingo or whatever. It is many things. And so this would be a project that I think they would catch on to, and they know the veteran feel good within their place. It's just a matter of equipment and logging in and being able for the veteran to come and tell us his or her story. And I think this is a good way that we can launch the future to see millions of veterans within our project telling their stories.
Yeah, absolutely. When we have worked with the Library of Congress through DAV to do this with our veterans, our friends at the Library of Congress are always very eager to assist us in helping with that. But the response was overwhelming. We had a lot of our members who really wanted to, sit down and share their stories. So you're right. We have a great pool of veterans to start interviewing right at the tip of our fingers. So we're going to start wrapping up. I wanted to go ahead and throw out that line as good Veterans History Project interviewers we all know. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Any closing thoughts from anyone? Anita?
Ashley, kind of following up on a question you asked earlier about follow-on benefits to that interview. One thing that's been very powerful is finding veterans where they have lost their awards, their medals, or they've been stolen, or they never received them, and so on and so forth. And when we hear about that, we then go to work in trying to get a replacement set of medals, or trying to assist them in receiving the medal they were entitled to but never received. So when those medals come in, we then ask how they would like to be presented. Often they will ask to have them presented at their church or at their veteran service organization, sometimes even at the state capitol, just wherever that veteran wants them to be presented. And that has been an absolute beautiful follow-on piece to the interview when those moments happen, to be able to stand up, share their story, and now share those awards and medals that they've received in a formal ceremony in some cases. So that's just an added extra thing that this project brings to the forefront for our veterans.
That's wonderful. I'm sure that's just incredibly meaningful for them. Sarah, you had some remarks?
Well, I think we would be remiss if we didn't thank the Library of Congress for today and the Veteran History Project for being a place for all of us to come together. We're from all over the country right now, and the Veteran History Project is a clearinghouse, if you will. And a museum curator told me once that when a person dies, the library of their life closes forever. So if we don't capture these stories now, we may not get the opportunity to. So thank you guys so much at Library of Congress for giving us the opportunity to share these stories.
Any other thoughts from the group? Mac?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on something that Sarah mentioned earlier about delivering the stories to the Library of Congress. We've had numerous fellows working for our members deliver those to Congress by hand. And actually what would happen is the fellow and the member would do a formal presentation to either Karen or Dr. Hayden with the tranche of interviews that they had collected, and kind of a self-serving is not the right word, but in order to promote this activity, often the member would Facebook Live the presentation itself. And we just thought that was a great benefit and a great thing to do in order to not only share the story of VHP, but also the fact that the members out there doing that in their districts.
Absolutely. Chaplain McCoy, you look like you had something you wanted to add.
Yes, I think it's, I too like to thank the Library of Congress for taking this on as a mission and a project, because this is one way that we can continue to grow in terms of many veterans that I interviewed come back and say, hey, you know, I should have shared this picture, or I should have told you about this award. Is there any way I can get that in? I said, sure, you know. And so it's good to know that there is somewhere where their file could be kept, where there is somewhere that they can feel that, well, when I leave this earth, there is somewhere in the world that has something about some of the things I've done as a person in the military. I think as we leave the Korean War, veterans as they are now dying out and so forth, it seems like a lot of the secrecy is kind of ending also. I think veterans are kind of more willing to tell their stories now than, say, World War II or even before that. So we're getting a more open veteran that is willing to share about what, and maybe it's social media, maybe it's because they are taking a lot of pictures, but it's just a difference. And so we need to look at how we're going to move ahead in these new days as we continue this project. But I think we'll find that our new veterans that is coming are more, they are more open to share some of the things that they have done in their stories. So just a kind of way of looking forward is how do we handle that in the future as we look at our new veterans coming out of Afghanistan and Iraq and so forth, because they are a little more, they're younger, yes, but they will be old if they keep living. So we want to make sure that they be able to tell their stories also.
Absolutely. Anything else before we close out? Mike?
Actually, I think you were in front of me. If you want to go ahead. Okay. Anyway, yeah, you know, I agree 100% with what the chaplain was saying. You know, a lot of times I'll get veterans that are very short-winded on answers, and so you know we'll have their wife, their husband, or one of their siblings, or somebody come in. and I can give them a paper and a pen and tell them while we're doing the interview, if you think of something, because you've most likely heard these stories over and over, write it down and hand it to me, and we'll get into that, get it into the interview. And then, like the chaplain was saying, I can't think of more than maybe 5% of all the veterans that we've interviewed that haven't come back and said, man, I wish I would have talked about that. Usually they don't even get out the door. And it's like, oh, I did forget something. Is it okay? And of course it's okay. This is their story to tell, and they deserve and have earned that right to be able to say whatever they want.
Yeah. All right. One last shot. Any final comments? Anita, there you go.
So, Ashley, I have one more story to tell, but I think it encapsulates about just how powerful the Library of Congress Veterans History Project really is to our veterans. I interviewed, he was my first Vietnam veteran to interview, so it was I was being very cautious. The veteran had suffered his entire life based on his experience in Vietnam. He was in the Marines. He was 19 years old. He was sent over to Vietnam as a replacement into a unit that had just been decimated. But before he got connected with his unit, he was in Da Nang, and his first assignment was to take his vehicle and meet the Huey coming in with our veterans in Vietnam veterans, soldiers, Marines in body bags. His job at 19 years old was to offload that helicopter onto his truck, then drive over and take those bodies to mortuary affairs. And he did that for 4 months. And he said, you understand that they really all weren't in body bags, and they really weren't all in one piece. So that's how he started out his tour in Vietnam. And again, when he came home, he had a bad reception. There was no welcome home. And he was not good to himself or his family for many years. So we do this interview, and he shares his story, and it's very powerful. And at the end of it, I asked him, I said, are you okay? And he stood up, kind of hitched up his pants and twirled around, wiped his nose. And then he looked at me, he said, that's the healthiest thing that I have ever done for myself. And so I just want to share his story, because I think it is just a perfect example of why the Veterans History Project is so meaningful and so powerful to our veterans, their families.
Yeah, I mean, it can clearly be an emotional experience for veterans sharing their stories. And like, I think, some of you have said, sometimes it's the first time they're sharing it. Sometimes it's the first time their family members are hearing it. But it can be such a therapeutic experience, and it can open them up to being willing to share it more and kind of work through some of those painful experiences. So it's truly just a wonderful project. I think we can all get behind that sentiment. This has been an amazing discussion. All of you are doing incredible work in your local communities on behalf of veterans. I'm so glad to have been a part of this today, and thank you all so much for taking part. It's really been my privilege to learn from each of you in this discussion, and I look forward, hopefully, when we're in normal circumstances, it would be wonderful to meet you all in person at some point. For those who are wanting to learn more about the Veterans History Project, I would highly encourage you to check out their website at www.loc.gov/vets, or you can email those fine folks at vohp@loc.gov. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart for watching today. We look forward to learning who the veteran in your life is soon. Take care.